We've seen so tragically the effects of those in politics, in public discourse, when they spread hate, that others pick up that language and turn it into actions. And it's, I suppose I have confidence in Canadians to be able to reject that as they properly should.
That was the NDP's Nathan Cullen responding to a question about whether or not the Munk debate between former White House advisor Steve Bannon and former George Bush speechwriter, now senior editor at The Atlantic, David Frum, should happen. Welcome back to the Power Panel. Stockwell, Cypriot, Françoise, and John Paul. The NDP is calling for it to be cancelled after the synagogue shootings in Pittsburgh. Stockwell, why don't I start with you? Is that a reasonable ask? What do you think about it?
It's completely unreasonable. First, I agreed with Nathan Cullen on his first comment on the show today. Totally disagree with him on this one. It's emblematic of what we're seeing, this rising trend, especially on university campuses, of wanting to shut down debate that you simply don't agree with, or students saying, oh, it's a debate about, freedom of speech, so I have to run to a safe place. It's absolutely ridiculous. And where was the NDP when Christopher Hitchens, for instance, was invited and took part in the Munk debates? Now, Christopher Hitchens is a guy that I wouldn't agree with on most points. He thinks Jesus Christ was a fraud and a hoax. I don't think that, but I certainly don't think he should be silenced on that point. He went viciously, Hitchens went viciously after Mother Teresa in a book called The Missionary Position, an awful book. He supported things like the revisionist history on Joseph Goebbels, but I still don't think he should be banned from speaking. I think he should be allowed to speak, even though I profoundly disagree with him. And where was the NDP when Christopher Hitchens was invited to speak at the Monks debate? Or Larry Summers, former president of Harvard, who suggested very clearly that women don't have the intellectual capacity or the DNA to handle things like math and science. He spoke at the Munk debates. Where was the NDP? No, this is because they're concerned about certain views that they don't agree with. I'm looking forward to watching it. I don't know much about what Bannon has ever written or said. I know quite a bit about David Frum. I'm really looking forward to him putting Bannon back on his heels. But banning the debate? No. Let's stop being babies about this, and let's say we allow free debate even if we don't like what we're hearing.
JP, what do you think?
I think it's better.
Sorry, Spirit. I'll get to you in 1 second.
No, yeah. I'm going to always err on the side of more free speech, frankly. I mean, I'm the journalist on the panel, so I think I can make that case. I'm not trying to defend anything that he says, of course, but I think it's important that we have these debates in public. As it is right now, a lot of the Trumpian, a lot of the Bannonite type discussions are going on in the dark web. They're going on anonymously behind closed doors. We're not really having a fulsome debate of ideas and ideologies in the public sphere. And I think that it's important to have these sort of things in Canada as well, because I think some of that ideology is not unique to the United States. And I think that sunlight is always the best disinfectant. If there are some things that we disagree with, we might as well have that debate in public. I think David Frum is more than equipped to refute some of his points if Bannon goes a little off color. And I think that it's not necessarily a bad thing to have these debates, to have these conversations. We live in a free country. This is not North Korea. We should be able to have a free exchange of views, even if we disagree with what they have to say.
Supriya?
So I would just say that, Stock, you may actually want to Google some of the things Bannon has said, and there's a bit of a false equivalency with bringing him up with Christopher Hitchens. If for no other reason, Bannon, according to at least his ex-wife, has said things like he didn't want his kids to go to a certain school because there are too many Jewish people or Jewish students that were at that school in particular. He's been cavorting with racist and far-right authoritarians that are trying to seize power in Europe as well.
Or who have. He helped Bolsonaro in Brazil.
Right, exactly. And Le Pen in France, right? So I think that probably factors into why the NDP is so vehemently opposed to this. But I think also once you get politicians wading in on issues of free speech, people are ultimately going to err on the side of free speech, because that's really what free speech is about, making sure that the government doesn't encumber any sort of debate in this. And one last thing I will just say is that the Munk debate, to begin with, is probably one of the worst forums to have this sort of thing, because you have two guys of similar backgrounds that work for the GOP in similar ways. How is Frum exactly supposed to counter Bannon in any substantive way when in a lot of it, it's not just Trump didn't happen overnight. The GOP laid the groundwork for Trump. Mainstream Republicans are idly sitting by because they refuse to enter into phylum cordata and grow a backbone to say anything against him. And if you look at guys
although Frum has been pretty vocal in his criticism.
He has.
I totally agree with you. I know what you mean. Yeah. They set the stage, but he's not shy now.
You see, it gives hope.
Frum has been very openly opposed to everything Trump has ever said or done. He is. Like,
he
really
has,
opposed,
but
so I don't worry about that.
He didn't happen overnight. He happened because the GOP laid the groundwork for a guy like Trump to come forward. And I mean, there's a Senate race going on right now in which the GOP candidate is putting out mailers of his Jewish Democratic opponent clutching money. Steve Bannon put out that ad of with the help of Stephen Miller during the primary debates of Hillary Clinton with a Star of David in the background with all this money saying most corrupt candidate ever. Steve King, who's a congressman in Iowa, wanted to get the other perspective of the the Nazi perspective in Poland when it came to what was happening back then, in the lead up to World War II. Like the Munk debate as it is circle jerky enough when it comes to who goes to them and who watches them. I just think this is a silly thing to a forum to have it to begin with.
Françoise?
So if I understood correctly, the question at the Munk debate will be the future of Western politics is populist, will say Mr. Bannon, or is liberal, will say Mr. Frum. I will always go on the side of freedom of expression, and unless the person brings its hatred speech, and I don't exactly foresee how that can be done with a guy like Frum in front of him and the crowd. And sometimes I feel like they don't give us, the public, enough credit.
Right.
I mean, if you go to a place like this to put your venom and try to really bring the crowds to go and do what we saw last weekend, I mean, I'll be surprised that any crowd would in Canada would let one of the two debaters do that. At the same time, I understand Nathan when he talks about the matter, and I'm at the same time surprised because if there's a place where I felt like big debates and hard-fought debates. Not everybody was necessarily on the side of the Jewish. There was the pro-Palestine, on so many issues at caucus that it brought some strong debate. But at the end of the day, we did it in a respectful way. So I have great expectation. I find it's weird that it's those two guys who are going to debate the issue. I do believe that at the end of the debate, we'll probably realize that there's just no future in politics for the Western world, period.
Oh my God, everything you say today is so depressing.
I know, it must be Halloween. It's my black cloud.